There is a version of masculinity that most men were handed without question. It came from the streets, from locker rooms, from fathers who were never taught better. It told you that strength means hardness, that dominance means power, that never showing what you feel means you have nothing to feel. Most men accepted that version. They built their identity on top of it. And then they spent the rest of their lives defending it, because deep down, they were afraid of what would happen if they looked underneath. That is where we need to start. Not with motivation, not with energy, with honesty. Because what passes for masculinity in a lot of men's lives is not strength. It is fear, carefully disguised, socially rewarded, but fear nonetheless. Think about the man who raises his voice when his authority is questioned. He does not do that because he is powerful. He does that because he is afraid. Afraid that if he does not dominate the room, he will be exposed as someone who does not deserve to lead it. The aggression is not confidence. It is a cover. It always has been. Think about the man who cannot admit he was wrong. He holds on to positions he knows are indefensible. He doubles down when challenged. He rationalizes, deflects, shifts blame. You might think that is stubbornness. It is not. It is the fear of being seen as weak. The fear that accountability is the same as worthlessness. And that fear costs him every relationship, every partnership, every opportunity to actually grow into something more than what he already is. Think about the man who controls his partner, who monitors her movements, manages her choices, decides who she can speak to and what she can wear. Most people call that possessiveness. What it actually is terror. Terror that without control, he will be abandoned. Terror that without ownership, he has no value. The controlling behavior is not a sign of how much he cares. It is a sign of how little he trusts himself to be enough. These are not edge cases, these are patterns. And they show up in quieter ways too. The man who needs every conversation to end with him being right. The man who cannot sit in silence without filling it. The man who chases validation in comments, in status symbols, in the attention of strangers. The man who disappears when things get emotionally difficult, who calls that independence, when what it really is avoidance. All of these behaviors trace back to the same root. Fear. Fear of inadequacy. Fear of exposure, fear of being seen and found lacking. What makes this particularly difficult is that our culture has spent generations rewarding this behavior. The aggressive man gets called alpha. The emotionally closed man gets called strong. The man who refuses vulnerability gets called disciplined. The labels are incorrect, but they are seductive. And once a man accepts those labels as his identity, he will fight hard to maintain them, because losing the label means losing himself. Or so he believes. Here is what actually happens to a man who builds his identity on fear-driven behavior. He becomes fragile. Not physically, psychologically. Because every time someone challenges him, it feels like an attack on his entire sense of self. He cannot separate a bad decision from being a bad person. He cannot separate a moment of weakness from a permanent condition. So he must protect himself at all times. He must never be wrong. He must never be soft. He must never need anything. And that kind of constant self-defense is exhausting. It is isolating. And it does not get stronger over time. It gets more brittle. Fragile things break, and the way that kind of identity breaks is not pretty. It shows up in rage, in destruction, in the collapse of things that should have been built to last. Real strength does not work that way. Real masculinity, and I want to be precise here, is not about being emotionless. It is about emotional control. There is a profound difference between those two things. The man who suppresses emotion has not mastered himself. He has just buried something that will eventually find a way out. The man who has emotional control knows what he feels. He examines it. He decides how to respond to it. He does not let it make decisions for him. That is discipline. Not the discipline of silence, the discipline of choice. And that kind of discipline is hard. It requires that you sit with discomfort without immediately trying to eliminate it. It requires that you hear criticism without immediately reacting to it. It requires that you feel fear and then ask yourself honestly whether the action you are about to take is driven by that fear or by something more considered. That kind of self-examination is not weakness. It is the beginning of actual strength. Let's talk about what that looks like in practice. Owning your mistakes is not a concession. It is a demonstration of security. When a man can say, clearly and without qualification, that he was wrong, that his behavior caused harm, that he would handle it differently now, he is showing something rare. He is showing that his sense of self is not dependent on his infallibility. He does not need to have been right. He is secure enough in who he is to have been wrong and to do better. Having hard conversations is not aggression, and it is not cruelty. It is respect. When you tell someone the truth, even when the truth is difficult, even when it will make them uncomfortable, even when it means conflict, you are treating them as capable of handling reality. The man who avoids hard conversations because he does not want to deal with the emotional aftermath is not being kind. He is being a coward in a costume of politeness. Setting boundaries is not hostility, it is architecture. The man who knows what he will and will not accept, and who communicates that calmly and clearly, is not pushing people away. He is showing people exactly who he is and how he operates. That kind of clarity is a form of integrity, and the people worth keeping in your life will respond to it with respect. Walking away without drama, that one matters. The man who can remove himself from a situation, from a relationship, from an argument, without burning everything down, without needing the last word, without making the exit as painful as possible, that man has genuine command of himself. Not because he doesn't care, but because he understands that how you leave something says everything about your character. Building strength privately. This is perhaps the least discussed and most important. The man who does the work when no one is watching. Who trains when it is not interesting. Who reads when it is not impressive. Who reflects when it is not comfortable. Who builds the internal architecture of someone worth trusting, not for recognition, but because that is what integrity actually requires. That is the man who does not need to perform strength because he has developed it. Now, consider the contrast. The fear-driven man is reactive. Every slight is a threat. Every challenge is a battle. Every question of his authority is an existential crisis. He spends enormous energy maintaining an image, defending a position, securing a status. He is exhausting to be around. He is exhausting to be. And over time, the people who matter most quietly distance themselves. Not because they stopped caring, but because there is no safety in proximity to someone who is always on the edge of explosion. The self-controlled man is different, not because he has no emotions, not because nothing affects him, but because he has developed the internal capacity to process his experience before he responds to it. He can be challenged without collapsing. He can be wrong without fracturing. He can be vulnerable without feeling destroyed. He is not threatened by the strength of others because his own worth is not comparative. He has done the internal work that makes external pressure manageable. That man earns long-term respect, not the short-term compliance that comes from intimidation. Actual respect. The kind that builds over years. The kind that survives conflict. The kind that people speak about quietly when they describe someone they genuinely admire. And here's the thing about fear. It does not go away. Not for anyone. The man you respect most, the man who seems most composed, most deliberate, most steady, he feels fear too. He has moments of doubt. He has days where everything feels uncertain. The difference is not that he does not feel it. The difference is what he does when he does. Courage is not the absence of fear. That definition has misled generations of men into believing that fear itself is the enemy. It is not. Fear is information. It tells you that something matters to you, that something is at stake. The question is never whether you feel it. The question is whether you let it make the decision. The man who acts from discipline, despite fear, is not reckless. He is not performing bravado. He has simply decided that his values and his long-term vision are more important than his immediate comfort. That is maturity. And maturity is not something that arrives. It is something that is built incrementally through choices made consistently over time. Responsibility is the foundation of it. Not responsibility as obligation, as burden, as something imposed from outside. Responsibility as ownership. As the understanding that your life, your choices, your character, your impact on the people around you, those things are yours, not anyone else's. Yours. The fear-driven man looks for someone to blame when things go wrong. The self-controlled man looks for what he can learn and what he can change. That ownership is not comfortable, but it is stabilizing. And it is the only honest foundation on which a real identity can be built. Masculinity, when it is genuine, is not about making others afraid of you. It is not about status or volume or the size of your presence in a room. It is about the quiet, consistent, sometimes unglamorous work of becoming someone you can actually respect when you are alone with yourself. It is the ability to look at your own behavior without flinching from the truth of what you see. It is the discipline to keep working even when the results are not yet visible. That man does not need to announce himself. He does not need to dominate. He does not need to prove. He simply is what he is, and the people with good judgment can see it. Now, I want you to sit with something before you close this out. Think about a recent decision you made. A reaction, a pattern you have been carrying. I want you to ask yourself, honestly, with no one watching, with no need to defend the answer, was that driven by discipline, or was it driven by fear? You have the ability to build something different, something quieter and more durable. It will not happen in a single conversation, but it starts with one honest moment of seeing yourself clearly and choosing to respond to that sight with intention rather than defense. That is where masculinity actually lives. Not in aggression, not in control, not in the performance of hardness. In the calm, disciplined, accountable, ongoing work of becoming a man whose strength is real. If you are ready to choose that path, if you are ready to choose strength over fear, drop this in the comments. Calm, controlled, strong. Not because someone told you to, because you mean it.